Thank you for having us. Really excited to have a book club talk.
Mm.
Dean and I were just saying it's such a nice change from interview style. So we're
Mhm.
hoping, we set the expectation, jump in with questions as we go. We're going to do a little bit of an overview and then just kind of open it up. We're all innovators here, so we'll have a conversation. Um, I'm just going to share 3 slides to get us started, and Dean and I will give a little context about the book. So, Innovate the Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft. It launched at the middle of February, February 18th. We've been really surprised and grateful at the attention it's received. We've gotten some nice accolades and some and nice promotion, which is really great because one of the main missions for us is to democratize innovation. We really want everyone to have skills to participate in the innovation process. And then the secondary mission is all the proceeds are going to STEAM education charities. So the further the book goes, the better it is for both of our missions. Um, I will turn it over to Dean because this isn't just a JoAnn and Dean book. Um, it's JoAnn and Dean as two longtime innovators. We met my first year in Microsoft, but most of my career has been out building companies from scratch or helping other people build their companies. Like I'm the entrepreneur. We kind of leaned into our roles. And when we met my first year in Microsoft, we started trading war stories and we're like, hey, you hit the same challenges I hit. You solved it kind of the same way I solved it, even though I was in a 10-person company and you're in a 100,000-person company at the time. And so that kind of triggered this back and forth over the course of a year of, are there truly patterns to innovation at that foundational level that cut across industry, cut across products, and doesn't matter if you're an engineer or a salesperson or a marketing person, this is just how it happens. So that's where it all started from, and I'll give, I guess, just for further little bit of context to who I am. Otherwise, I spent 5 years at Microsoft leading the Data Center of the Future program, where we were reimagining the data center from a blank sheet of paper to what it needs to be for the next 5, 10, 15 years. My background is in mechanical engineering, the energy world, and the sustainability world. And I've been in the technology space applying sustainability to technology since about 1999. So quite a while now. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, and just a quick bit of background. So happy to be here with this group. As JoAnn, if JoAnn is the entrepreneur in this, I'm the entrepreneur. I'm 20 years at Microsoft, and have worked in various roles and functions across the company. Prior to that, I was in consulting and did an MBA at INSEAD, so kind of a classic, business training, but managed to find my way into AI research at Microsoft. So today I work in the office of the chief scientist, kind of looking at the next generation of AI models and what they could do. JoAnn did a nice job of setting up why we wrote the book. We like to say that we're not actually the authors. There are hundreds of thousands of authors across Microsoft, and certainly several dozen that we were able to reach out and engage and interview. And what we loved about that was, a lot of business books are written from the outside and they can kind of give the surface layer of what happens. We really tried to dig in and get into the, front lines details. And what we loved about our interviewees was that they willingly and happily told us about both the failures and the successes. And we felt that was so important to capture because a huge part of innovation is taking risk and sometimes failing, but learning and coming back stronger. So by really sitting with people who drove all these amazing innovations and then bringing our own perspective, we were able to get a real insider's view. We felt privileged to tell Microsoft's innovation story because it is kind of a remarkable company, 50 years old, still innovating. And when JoAnn and I did the count, there's at least four separate occasions when the company has fundamentally reinvented itself. And so the ability to kind of renew and change as the environment and the technology changes is really in Microsoft's DNA, and that's what we tried to get down to and capture. Um, but maybe
Well
we,
said.
yeah, we go from there.
So the last slide will just give you a little bit of context of what's in the book, and then we're both going to share kind of our favorite story or practice or tool, because this is a book of how. We really wanted to create a book of how. We're both book nerds. We have all, like, we went through Barnes and Noble and Fifth Ave in New York when we were there, and we were like, hey, we read that, we love that. Like all the books. Our book, we tried to add to the literature, not repeat everything that's out there. And we also tried to bring it together into if you were just going to read one book to get started in innovation, this would be a good place to start. And it'll point you in a lot of directions, but it'll give you the 101 level of how to create a repeatable, scalable, responsible innovation practice for your org, whether you're a one person hoping to grow to 10 people company or you're already a 100,000, 200,000 person company. So the book is in two halves. We've got six product slash business case studies, and we picked a different focus of innovation for each one of those. So you'll see in Xbox, all the things we could have talked about with Xbox, we talked about culture, and there's a good reason why. I think Dean's going to tell us a little more about that one. All the way through to Microsoft Research, which is this innovation industrial lab, which are kind of rare today, but are in our stories, it shows up again and again as a central driver of innovation and breakthroughs and those reinventions Dean mentioned. The second half of the book is where we go from the what happened, who was there, when did it happen, and what are the takeaways. We translate those lessons into four patterns. And we break down how you can innovate every day over the years with everyone and beyond technology. And I may come back to by beyond technology because for me, it's one of the most interesting things about writing a book of innovation about Microsoft is most of the innovation wasn't technology. So here's this big tech company that reinvented itself again and again, and most of that wasn't technology. So it was the other thing. So that's how it's set up. There is this one in between chapter that's part case study, part pattern, and we call it responsible innovation. As we mentioned, I come from the sustainability world. Dean comes from the responsible AI world, and Microsoft has core to its methods, privacy, accessibility, security. So we wanted to show how these weren't outputs of innovation; they're actually foundational elements of innovation, and we break down how we do that. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, just to give a flavor of what's in the case studies, there's actually two that I think are really complementary. We wrote about Xbox because it's an example. There's all different ways to innovate. Xbox is an example of building a net new business from zero inside an existing company. And the reason we chose Xbox was because it was even harder for them because they were a hardware and entertainment business growing up inside a software and productivity company. And in fact, we start the whole book with this amazing story of how the founders of Xbox had to go in front of Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and convince them that they had to kind of break away from this governing strategy of what the company does and embrace this new domain. of gaming and how they had to sell that idea and pitch it up the chain of command. And then over the lifespan of 25 years of Xbox, constantly changed their business model so that it would both be relevant to the gaming community and relevant to Microsoft. One of the biggest things Xbox contributes to the company now is their customer zero for all of our cloud computing and AI. The fact that they run these huge workloads of hundreds of thousands of gamers in Azure pushes Azure to be better and more responsive and higher uptime. So they've kind of taken this business that a lot of people thought was irrelevant and made it absolutely critical to Microsoft. So we love that as a story of a net new business growing and succeeding. And then Microsoft Office is a case of an established business that was 30 billion a year at the time they started to transform, had almost 80% market share, had no external pressure to change. But a handful of innovation leaders inside the group saw opportunity, and they saw opportunity in AI that they wanted to go after. And they very carefully crafted the moves to change this, super tanker into the right direction. And so it's kind of the inversion of the Xbox story. It's an established business, but you want to move in a new direction. But when you read the two cases, a lot of the tactics and practices they used were similar. Influence, persuasion, motivating people through the vision as opposed to the present day. And so that's kind of why we like the way the case study approach helps us to tell these stories in ways that bring forth the universal practices.
It's such a good point. And some of the conversations I've been having with other innovation leaders in different size companies, people place their bets. Oh, we need a venture studio, or we need to invest in startups and then pilot their work, or we need to carve out and do like what Xbox did and be a separate entity that eventually merges back into the company. What's interesting about the six case studies is there's six different flavors of transformational innovation happening within one company, and it's got all the different models. So you have Xbox carved out, you have Microsoft Research, that industrial lab, you have um, Bing, created really as a loss leader, but a competitive advantage. And there's the Bing story. Don't count out Bing. Bing is cool. We have to like temper our enthusiasm for Bing a lot of times, but it really is a surprising story. Um, Visual Studio Code was yet another. It was a startup, but within an existing division, within an existing product. So there's all these different ways, but when you abstract them to the actual process and tools of going from what we call nothing to something to scale, we keep seeing the same pieces and parts. And so that's where the pattern chapters fit into this and um,
Could
innovating
I?
every day. Oh, yeah, go for it, Dean.
I was just going to say, could I talk about my favorite pattern? I can't contain
Sure. Yeah.
enthusiasm, and I'd love to hear yours as well.
Yeah.
But Lauren said something in my breakout that really resonated with me, and she said a big part of innovating is servant leadership.
Mm.
And it immediately brought me to innovating with everyone. Because one of the things we observed over and over is that um, basically, if you're an innovator and you're trying to drive innovation, you're asking everyone in the company to take a bet on you because it's just the nature of innovation. It's not certain, it's not proven. And so in the research, we saw that the most effective innovators had vast networks across the entire company, and they were constantly cultivating and renewing those networks because really when you're going to go for it with an innovation, you're saying, trust me. You're saying, I got this. It's uncertain. There's risk, but I can do this. And so the repeat innovators, they both understood the whole company and they knew where they would need support at different times in the innovation lifecycle. And then they also invested in the key relationships way before they needed to call in the favor or get someone, going and working for them, because that's the way you build trust and you kind of get your support base in place even before you need to ask them to do something to you. So I'm sorry to
Yeah.
jump over you, JoAnn, but I was so
No, I
excited
love
about
it.
that pattern.
Yeah, and what we really like about the Innovating with Everyone chapter is all the chapters, we found the frameworks and the tools to go from concept to practical application. So, innovating with everyone, start with trust, meet people where they're at, bring them along the journey. That's something as innovators we've heard our whole careers, we've practiced our whole careers. But there are actual psychological behavior change models and frameworks with steps and guidance that can help you do it better and teach it to other people so that it's repeatable and scalable. So now you don't have to do it every time. You can actually grow other people in the practices of it. That is so core to what we tried to achieve with this book of in a world where tech is changing so rapidly and business is going to have to change rapidly to keep up with it, those skills can't be the limiting factor. We can't I'm 25 years in. I don't want the graduating class of 2025 to have to wait till 2050 to be really good at these practices, right? Like I want them to come out, read the book, start playing with the practices, and within 3 years, because we know it takes time. But it's the difference between them being capable of repeatable, scalable, responsible innovation in 2028 versus 2050 with the pace of change could have profound impacts on the future we create. So that's what we're jazzed about is actually breaking it down to the tool level and putting those tools in your hands. So some of the big ideas that have come out of the book that I'll just give you the taglines and then if something sparks, ask a question and we'll dig in on it. So one of the things is lead with X. We have a framework in the book that comes out of the Xbox chapter. We saw how it worked, and we also saw when the team didn't use it, how they failed. And it's called BXT, Business Experience Technology. You'll all recognize it as a flavor of design, desirability, feasibility, viability, but by BXT, it gives a real clear message of you always lead with X. If you lead with the customer experience, you'll succeed. Don't let B and T get ahead of X. Another one is culture is a verb. So we go into how do you build a culture of innovation in real deliverable ways. Innovation is loopy. That's one of our favorites. And we talk about all the loops and within loops of the process and how to fit people with phase in those loops and different roles that to fit different attributes and aspirations of your people because not everyone has a role in innovation, but not everyone is fit for every role. Like if you put me at the end of the innovation process in the scale role, I'm going to get real frustrated real fast, right? Like I love living in ambiguity and blank sheet of paper. Um, some other ones, Dean, what comes to mind?
I really like, I always go back to say it ugly as a term that it's really resonated throughout Microsoft is this idea of good ideas come from anywhere. The more ideas you can get on the table, the more you will have to choose from. And what holds that back often is people just feeling like their idea isn't fully formed or they can't articulate it or they're going to be judged because it's a new idea. And so when we sign books at Microsoft, the thing people always ask us to sign with is the tag "Say It Ugly,"
Yeah.
because what it means is just if you've got an idea, put it out there, let people react to it, develop it, cultivate it. Next time you say it, you'll say it a little less ugly, and eventually it'll sing. But that idea of just getting the ideas out in raw form so you can start developing them is really critical.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions in the
Yeah,
chat. Maybe we could go to those first and then
That's
come back to
great.
you. Maybe
yeah.
starting with Chris, since it was relevant to what you were chatting about.
Mhm.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes. So at Whataburger we call our employees family members, and so one of the things that our new leadership has been very clear about is as we stand up our innovation space, like I'm having a sign fabricated right now that says innovation to make our family members' lives easier. And we went back and forth whether we wanted to say make your lives easier or make your jobs easier. And hopefully lives easier is really where we're going to be at because I think jobs leads to something else. But I was just curious in the
Mm.
BXT kind of methodology, where does the family member experience fit into that? So that again, because I think that can really help drive the overall customer experience.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you want
You know,
to?
Chris was in my breakout, so I got a little history. And there is a chapter that's not actually, I'm going to take this down so that we can all see each other.
Mhm.
Um, there is a chapter that's not on the screen because we're doing digital only content, and the first bonus chapter we wrote is about the garage. And the garage are these innovation studios. We have 15 of them around the world. And these are the places where anyone can go. It's a maker space, a collaborative space. They host workshops and skilling. They also host our global hackathon, which is 75,000 people participated in it and in every year. But it's their mission is to bring everybody into the innovation process. And we don't call them family, it's team. But it's that place where it's the dinner table experience. It's, hey, tell us what you're working on, what you're excited about, where you're at, what help you need. And then they can connect with people all throughout the organization, which you can imagine at 200,000 people, you don't know barely anybody. So you can meet some really interesting other teammates and put your heads together on problems that excite you both. But Dean, where does your head go with
Yeah,
this?
a couple of things. The nice thing about the BXT framework is business user experience and technology, but you could substitute user for, if you wanted another B in there, you would say beneficiary, right? Is whoever is actually going to benefit from the innovation needs to be the focus of the innovation. And our problem at Microsoft is that we're a technology company at heart. And if we're not really intentional, we will always let the technology lead us, what the technology can do, not what the users or beneficiaries want it or need it to do. So I think you can apply BXT to anyone that you're innovating on behalf of. I also love the fact that you didn't put jobs or work in there because if you think about the Microsoft mission to help every individual and organization in the planet achieve more, we don't say specifically in what context or on what tools or devices, but I think when you make your mission at that level, it's more inspirational and it's more likely to keep you true to the underlying, goals that you've set out. And then the other thing I would just say is that I love the fact that you're thinking of people as a family, and this will help us to segue into Frank's question in a minute. Microsoft today feels much more like a family than it did 20 years ago when I joined. And trust and familiarity and proximity to people is so key. It's why you can say it ugly. Is
Right.
if
Yeah.
you feel
I love
close and
saying that.
Yes.
accountable to your everyone that you're with, you can say it ugly. If you don't, you
Yes.
can't. So family is a beautiful way to describe.
I love that.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I'll actually be at Human X, which is an AI conference in Vegas next week on a panel as a beneficiary. I'm not an AI expert. I simply am the one that the AI folks are selling to. And so I'm like, I've got to integrate it into my business. And so I love the fact that you added beneficiary in there because that's kind of the tact of my panel that I'll be on in there. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so
I
much.
guarantee you, you'll be the
Yeah.
most important panel member.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And
you'll
it
be
really
the that.
and it does remind us that the first customer of anything you're innovating is your teammates. It is your
Yes.
company because you need all of those people to get whatever it is you're creating out into the world. So they are the first X that you have to
Right.
solve for.
Thank you so much, you
Yeah.
guys.
Melody, it's a good segue to Frank's question if we could.
Definitely. Yeah. Over to Frank.
Yeah, Frank.
I switched to phone. Can you hear me? It's the first time
Yeah.
I'm doing so. Okay. So, being an outsider, I'm watching Microsoft with a big deal of sympathy, in particular Satya Nadella's story. But being an outsider, I have the impression that a lot of things changed when he took helm and in the years to come. What's your view on that? Did it really change, or was it an additional level of innovation that he brought in, or am I wrong as an outsider?
Go
So
for it, Dean.
yeah, for sure. This is my bread and butter. So there's a common sort of view that Microsoft innovated when Bill Gates was CEO. It failed to innovate under Steve Ballmer, and then it became innovative again under Satya. Um, if having looked at it many times, I actually feel there was great innovation in each era. Also, the Steve Ballmer era brought us incredible financial discipline that we lacked early on. And one of the things JoAnn and I always like to talk about is constraints drive creativity. You actually have to have financial rigor and structure and focus to keep the B in balance in your innovation in the BXT. Um, what did get out of hand in the Steve Ballmer era, and I experienced it firsthand, was we lost the ability to collaborate comfortably and effectively across the whole company. We did not think of each other as family by any stretch. And some of the things that were at the heart of this has been written about publicly, was, our review system. When we would give out bonuses and stock awards, it had to fit a very steep forced curve, which means for any one person to do extremely well in terms of bonus and then in comp, someone else had to do extremely poorly. And so it led to this very adversarial culture where people felt, I need to be in it for me and not for others or the company. Satya really systematically sought to to change that. And the things he did were, most importantly, he brought in the idea of the growth mindset, which is that we are not know-it-alls. We're not paid to be know-it-alls. We're paid to be learn-it-alls. We changed the review system. When we write up our accomplishments today, I'll have to do it next month. I have to write about what I did, how I made others successful, and how I built on the work of others. And your whole review write-up, it breaks into those three categories. And he modeled the behavior. It was incredible to present to Satya on AI, and you wouldn't get grilled or, why don't you know this? He was curious. He was asking questions because he wanted to learn. And he brought this very humane approach. So the way we used to innovate, I would say, was more about a bunch of people trying to get the win, and eventually somebody would get something that was super innovative. And it worked, but it was painful. Now we're much more collaborative. That's why a pattern in the book is innovate with everyone, because we saw that in every case study where people would say, I couldn't have done it without this group or that group. So I think it's more of a change in how we innovate versus that we do innovate. But having seen both worlds, I love this one much better. It's a much more pleasant and I would say successful environment for innovation.
I'll add a little practical
Yeah.
color to it, which is all the teams we talked to say it took about 5 to 7 years for Satya's influence to percolate far enough into the company to really feel the changes across the company. And it's still reaching into some of the far corners. It's pretty well saturated now. And I know I'm like the garage champion, but one of the things we learned doing the bonus chapter was Satya knew that it was going to take years to shift the big culture. So to get immediate wins and get people on a fast track, he partnered with the garage to create the global hackathon to show people they could innovate with each other and ideas come from everywhere and you can put your ugly idea on the table and nothing bad will happen to you. You won't lose your job or your money. And so it was the quick practical way to start practicing the culture he wanted while making all of the shifts that needed to happen to get a whole corporation into this new mindset.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question, by the way.
All right, I think you can carry on a bit longer and then we can open it up to questions again.
Okay.
Maybe to go back to Chris's question, the other, there's something else kind of embedded in it, which is important. But I think a lot of people tend to think that when we innovate, we're innovating the product. And that's why our fourth pattern is innovating beyond technology or innovating beyond the product. And JoAnn and I both have a favorite book called The 10 Types of Innovation that's really inspired us over the years because you really need to think beyond that. You need to think about the employee experience, as Chris says. You need to think about whether your business model itself needs to be reinvented and you need to innovate at that level, especially in the era of Gen AI, where so much is changing and there's so much disruption. So do I have to innovate, my business model? We found groups that had innovated the annual review and rewards process to encourage risk taking because they saw that some people weren't doing this because they were afraid they'd be, penalized.
The
So
recruiting process, that
yes,
one came up again and again. How do you recruit innovators? You
Oh,
innovate the
so
recruiting
big.
process.
I'm
yeah,
so glad you brought that up because I will tell you, having done this now for over a decade with a company in transition and now in a massive growth phase, two things. Number one, you get to the root cause, which does come back to our people. And number
yes,
two, these are human beings. So it's not as
yes,
if you just pluck them out and say, well, you don't work for me now, get out of here. I mean, these are humans that have a career with us that we're saying, okay, how do we bring everyone along so that if we have two sides, recruit, like JoAnn was just saying, and develop. And
yeah,
then also be cognizant of the fact that, you know what, just because our company is changing, it doesn't mean that everybody brings along with them the skill set and what's their journey going to be. Can they make that transformation? And potentially, if they can't, what does that mean? Because again, you can't just street everybody and just say, well, forget it. Sorry, you don't fit in my model anymore. See you later.
I
Um,
could see where Dean's brain's going. I know where
I
you're
was gonna,
going, Dean.
I was gonna
Go.
let you, I
Do
was
it.
gonna let you
No,
go
do
there,
it.
Joanne. All right.
You
So
love
one of
this
our
one. You
favorite
love it.
expressions from the book, and we got it directly from Phil Spencer, who's the CEO of Xbox and all of our gaming assets. He said every time the business is going to go through a big transition, he rehires the team. And we love the term because it's like it's a balance. You're not
Yes.
imagining that nothing has changed, but you're not creating the perception that people are irrelevant. You're saying, you know what, we're going to map out the new needs of the business. We're going to compare them to everyone's current role and scope, and we're going to work with each individual to pivot. And just what you were saying there, Chris, is so many companies fail to do that. They just assume either I need to start up a whole new division or I need a skunk works or something, or they just imagine that nothing's changing. And rehiring the team is part of it. But the other piece that also comes from gaming is they hire for culture ads and not necessarily culture
Great point.
fits. So it's this idea our culture can't be static because our customers and our industry is not static. One way to always evolve the culture is by bringing in new blood. And if we're very intentional about who that is, just the new hires themselves will kind of help us to move the culture in the right direction.
If I can offer just one other thing, and again, this is so helpful for me. Thank you so much. It is the other question that started asking last year when we were starting this is this a job you want? Because
Mm,
it's very easy to say we need a development plan, things like that. But I'm literally asking a category manager to change to
yeah,
running an innovation testing center. And I'm going, yes, I can develop you with skills that I think that you're going to need, and I'm learning too. But is this a job you even want? Like, do you even want to
yeah.
be in this role? Because if not, you wouldn't have applied. It's not fair for me to shoehorn you into that. It's not going to end well.
Right. Yeah, Phil gave this great example of, when they switched from predominantly hardware development to cloud. What does the transistor engineer do in the new paradigm? Well, Phil's like, don't assume, ask.
Right.
Hey,
Mhm.
do you want to learn a new role? Do you want to
Are
change
you up
what
for
you're
this?
doing, or do you love doing transistors? If that's what you love, that's great, you know. And it was this really just humble, honest offering of here's where we're going. We want you to come along with us. But if it's not a fit for you, we'll support you, you know? And they did that at every level of the company. They made a big business model change at one point, or structural change at one point, where they took away the profit and loss statements from senior leaders and consolidated them all under the head of Xbox. So only he had the P&L. And one of the most well-respected, well-liked senior leaders was like, what am I even doing here if I don't have a P&L? And they're like, but this is where we need to go. And so he's like, well, I'm going to leave the company. And they're like, that's fine. We wish you well, and you
Right.
got to let them go. So it works both ways.
What I also like about what Chris said is that, and what you followed up with, Jen, is if you don't ask, nobody's gonna put their
Right.
hand up and say, I'm not
Right.
sure about this thing. They're going to work on their resume. They're going to, start kind of looking for the next thing. And when they've got it, they'll go because people are always afraid this is change. And if I say I'm not 100% on board, then I'm going to be targeted or left behind. And so that's that simple ask, that simple process of asking, do you like it? Is this for you? Is this where you want to go? Is so powerful and surprisingly underutilized everywhere that we looked,
Yes.
except gaming.
Yeah. Any other
Thank you.
questions come up?
If anyone has a question, feel free to just come on mic, or also you can post it in the chat if you're unable to talk right now, and I can read it out for you.
Maybe while we're waiting, I'll share a little bit more of one of my favorite things. So, having come from small, mid-sized companies, PE backed or VC backed, or bootstrap mostly, um, coming into Microsoft, I had all these frameworks and tools. I was, 20 years into my career, and I was being asked to run the data center of the future, which cut across everything, had stakeholders everywhere. And this really cool dot connected for me. There are two frameworks we introduced in the book. Pasture's Quadrant, which breaks down, it's a 2x2 of different types of research, and Pisano's innovation map, which is a 2x2 of business versus tech change. And individually, they can really help you create the strategy for your research and development operations. But only when I got to Microsoft did I see how they fit together to give you this full what we call around the block innovation path of how do I marry curiosity driven research, like the pure academic exploration of ideas, all the way to business transformation. So that's in the fourth pattern of the book. And I'd love, once you all read the book, to hear thoughts on it, because it's a new framework that we're putting out in the world for the first time. And we're still even wrapping our heads around it.
Mhm. I think I
Thanks,
saw
JoAnn.
Roman's hand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm curious if because I see that in Microsoft there's a lot of culture and environment and ecosystem networking, a lot of kind of infrastructure supporting innovation.
Yeah.
If there are also some hard measures, some goals and KPIs that are complementing it and kind of steering it.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's nothing at the corporate level. So it is very organic and distributed across the company. What I saw, and JoAnn should pile on, but the metrics that drove innovation were always about the users or the beneficiaries. And so innovation is not an ends in itself. The goal is to give better service and support and opportunities to your users. So we saw incredible use of metrics at the team or product level. But at the company level, I think we don't really have anything that we don't try because it's too heterogeneous and it would be too hard at the company level. But JoAnn.
There are some great metric models, though, from the case studies. Like one of our favorites is from the Office case study. As Dean mentioned, we went from a box with CDs that you bought at Staples with a list of features on it. That was kind of how you sold the product to now it's AI powered cloud software. If you're not using the features don't justify the cost of the software. So they changed to from a scope, schedule, budget metric to what they call kept rate. So if the AI serves up a design in PowerPoint of a slide, does the user keep it? Or do they take it and change it? Or do they just ignore it altogether and do their own thing? In the background, we're tracking all that telemetry to figure out whether what we're serving up is kept or not. And if it's not kept, we've got work to do. So we got to keep innovating on the X.
Understand, thank you. And I like this heterogeneous business-driven KPIs rather than innovation per se KPIs.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it really drives where you need to innovate, yeah, to support a bigger goal. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Of
Yeah.
course. Good question.
All right, thank you so much. We just have a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to be here with our community today. We know you have a crazy schedule, so it really means a lot. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I think you should be seeing a slide now.
Yes, we see it. Yep.
So please join us, our free insider community. You can sign up at innovation@microsoft.com. That's how you get the bonus chapters and tools and courses. Please buy the book or a box of books for your friends, your teammates, students graduating soon. All the proceeds are going to STEAM education. So we appreciate any and all support. And we look forward to hearing what you think about the book.
And maybe just to add, one of the things JoAnn and I have started to use is just to give the book. Of course, we have bulk because we're the authors, but we give it to people whom we need to innovate with. And it really is good. We think it does a nice job of defining vocabulary and ideas and mental models. So all the proceeds go back to STEAM education. We don't benefit financially, but we benefit as more innovators come into the world and create more opportunities to change the world, the way the world operates. So hopefully the folks on the call will see that value as well.
Let us know.
All right.